This would be our 8th lesson today of Life in the UK test, which we are doing from the study guide 2026 edition, which is the official book of Life in the UK. So here's a brief introduction of the book. This is a 2026 edition, Life in the UK test study guide. That's how it looks. And there are 8 chapters in the book. Chapters 1, 7, and 8 are not tested. This is mostly information, appendices, and some practice tests. The only chapters that are tested are 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. In my previous videos, I've been saying that there are 7 chapters, but it doesn't matter. Why? Because the most important thing is that the 5 chapters that are tested, I did not make any mistake saying the correct numbers of those chapters, so I'm sorry for that. If you can buy the book, that would be good. If you want to buy it or borrow it from library, that would be good. Otherwise, you can use my videos to prepare. The best thing about buying the book or having from the library is that you can underline and make some notes as we go along, because I underline the important things in the book, and just to come back to those important bits before our exam or test. Right, so we will be starting from the distinct identity, which is this bit. We have already covered so far 18 pages, so as you could see that we are on page number 19. Our distinct identity means that now the UK, the Britain, was trying to or achieving its uniqueness, because it had been developing over the years and decades and centuries. The Middle Ages saw the development of a national culture and identity. After the Norman conquest, the king and the noblemen had spoken Norman French, and the peasants had continued to speak Anglo-Saxon. So this is the Norman conquest thing I would like to highlight this way. After the Norman conquest, which was William the Conqueror, he came from France. And obviously he and his courtiers, his people, they used to speak French. But the people in Britain at that time, they would speak Anglo-Saxon language. So in this way, French and Anglo-Saxon mixed together, and that's how English, modern English, came into being. That's why we have so many words from France, from French language. Now the question is, some words, some modern words in English, for example, park and beauty, are based in Norman French, and others, apple, cow, and summer, are based in Anglo-Saxon words. So in this paragraph, this is the only important thing. So you will be having a question in exam. For example, you will be given 4 words, and you will be asked which 2 words are from Norman French. Park and beauty would be included, and in those you have to click on that. And if they say which 2 words are from Anglo-Saxon, so apple, cow, summer, sometimes they would ask you to choose 3, sometimes they would ask you to choose 1 or 2. The question is, you should see that there are many words, but in the book they have only given us 2 words from Norman French and 3 words from Anglo-Saxon. So just remember those and you will be perfectly fine. Right. By 1400, England official documents were being written in English, and English became the preferred language of the royal court and parliament. So this is the time when English language became the language of the royal court and parliament, which means that the ruling class, and the parliament means the people who would make laws and who would obviously legislate. So they would speak English language, which means that if the ruling class and if the parliamentarians speak English or a specific language, then obviously everybody else needs to understand and follow that. So the question would be, by which time English became the national language or preferred language of royal court? So that would be 1400. Okay, in the year leading to up to 1400, Geoffrey Chaucer wrote a series of poems in English about a group of people going to Canterbury on a pilgrimage. That's very important. Okay, so the story is that these people, some people decided to go to Canterbury, which is the biggest church in England, and obviously the Archbishop Bishop of Canterbury, who is the head of the church, sits in Canterbury as well. So they decided to go and pay homage or pilgrimage at Canterbury. So Geoffrey Chaucer, it was a long journey, and obviously these days people used to travel by horses and other stuff. So they decided that everyone should tell a story, and in this way they would entertain themselves and wouldn't be bored in this long journey. And Geoffrey Chaucer was one of those peoples who was among the pilgrims, and he wrote a book called the Canterbury Tales. Okay, so in this Canterbury Tales, all of these stories that were told by these pilgrims are mentioned, written in the form of poetry, and it is supposed to be the first English book. It was one of the first books to be printed by William Caxton. That's very important. This is the first book, English book, you could say that, but it was Old English, which was printed by a printing machine, and that printing machine was invented by William Caxton, the first person in England to print books using a printing press. Okay, so this is something different. This is something important. Obviously, you could see that England is changing, a distinct identity. We are talking about that. So the question is, who wrote Canterbury Tales? So the answer is Geoffrey Chaucer. Or sometimes you will have a question like that. Geoffrey Chaucer wrote which book? And then you will have the names of 4 books, and then you have to write Canterbury Tales. Many of the stories still popular. Okay, so we won't be looking at these now. In Scotland, many people continue to speak Gaelic and Scots language, and Scots language also developed. So like in England, people speak French and Anglo-Saxon in Scotland, and then obviously English. In Scotland, it was Scottish Gaelic and in Scots language. Okay, a number of people began to write in Scots language. One example was John Barber, who wrote the Bruce and the Battle of Bannockburn. So in Scotland, John Barber wrote a book in Scots language, which was the Bruce, and this was about the Battle of Bannockburn, where King Robert Bruce defeated English king. Okay, so you could be asked who wrote the Bruce. You could be asked John Barber wrote what book, or John Barber wrote the Bruce, which is about which battle, and then you will have to choose the name of the battle. The Middle Ages also saw a change in the type of buildings in Britain. So obviously culture is developing different structures. Everything changes when a nation is developing and moving forward. Literature, songs, paintings, buildings. So castles were built in many places in Britain and Ireland, partly for defence. Today many are ruins, although some such as Windsor and Edinburgh are still in use. So this was made in the Middle Ages. So question is, which 2 castles still exist from Middle Ages? So your answer would be Windsor and Edinburgh Castle. Great cathedrals, for example, Lincoln Cathedral, were also built, and many of those still are for worship. Several of the cathedrals had windows of stained glass. That's important. Telling stories about the Bible and Christian saints. The glass in York Minster is a famous example. So this is an important paragraph. The question is, which 2 castles are still existing from Middle Ages? So Windsor and Edinburgh. The question is, so what type of stories are told in the stained glass paintings on cathedrals, windows, and churches? So these would be the stories from Christian saints and Bible. And what is the best example of stained glass stories? So then the glass in York Minster is famous example. So this is your answer for these questions. Right, during this period, England was an important trading nation. Okay. English wool became a very important export. Now you could see that this is now trading business, more money. People came to England from abroad to trade and also to work. Many had special skills such as weavers from. Okay, this is an extremely important bit. Okay, many had special skills such as weavers came from France, engineers came from Germany, glass manufacturers came from Italy, and canal builders from Holland. I can tell you that this is such an important paragraph that you will always have a question. Even if you are doing practice question, you will see questions. So for example, during the Middle Ages or when England was developing, weavers came from which country? So your answer would be France. Or sometimes the question is choose the right option. Weavers came from, and then you will have four countries. Let's say France, England, France, Wales, Italy, Luxembourg, whatever, and then you have to choose France. So you have to remember who came from which part of the world. Okay, so if you remember these things, so see that weavers, engineers, glass manufacturers, and canal builders, these are four different type of people who came from different countries. So please make sure that you remember this. The Wars of Roses, it's a very, very important topic, and you will definitely have one or two questions from this paragraph. In 1455, a civil war was begun to decide who should be the King of England. Okay, now civil war means in 1445, two royal families, families started fighting with each other, and this one said, okay, I will be the King of England. The other said, no, I will be the King of England. And then they started fighting. It was fought between the supporters of two families, the House of Lancaster and the House of York. So the question is, when did the War of Roses begin? 1455. And the question is, this war was fought between which two families? The House of Lancaster and the House of York. Okay. This was called the Wars of Roses because the symbol of Lancaster was red rose and the symbol of York was white rose. That's extremely important. Okay. Now, House of Lancaster and House of York fought with each other in Wars of Roses to decide who would be the King of England. And obviously they had their own symbols, like people have flags these days, so every country has their own flag, and when they fight, their tanks, their ammunition, their whatever, their planes, they have their own flags. Okay, in those times they did not have flags, so these were the symbols. The question is, which rose was the rose of House of Lancaster, red or white rose? Now it's very simple to remember. See that the House of Lancaster, if you look at this here under the flower, the red rose for the Lancaster. Okay, the House of Lancaster, it ends, the house name Lancaster ends in R. Yeah, and R stands, R can begin red. So the white rose is for York. Okay, now if you remember one of these, you remember the other one. You know that it's either red or white. So the house which name ends in R has a red rose. For example, Lancaster ends in R, so it means their rose is red, and obviously the others have white rose. The war ended in the Battle of Bosworth Field in 1485. Okay, now that is very, very important. Sometimes the question is, when did the War of Roses start? 1455. When did it end? 1485. Sometimes the question is, how long did the War of Roses take? So I think it is 30 years if you minus 1455 from 1485. 65, 70, yeah, 30 years. So 30 years they fought against each other. King Richard III of the House of York was killed in the Battle of, and Henry the Tudor became the leader of the House of Lancaster, became King Henry VII. So obviously after 30 years, King Richard of York was killed, and Henry Tudor survived. He was from the House of Lancaster, and he became King Henry VII. Henry then married Richard's niece, Elizabeth of York, and united the two families. Okay, so now after Richard III was killed, Henry married Richard's niece, and then in this way united two families. Now the whole thing was for becoming the king. So what is the point of fighting for 30 years, getting people killed, and after that, when you become the king, you unite two houses, and this is how it ends? Fine, it's good that it ends, but the problem is that they have been fighting for 30 years, and so many people lost their lives. Anyhow, Henry was the first king of the House of Tudor. The symbol of the House of Tudor was red rose with a white rose inside it. So see that Lancaster had a red rose, House of York had white rose. When Henry VII became the king, he married Richard's niece, and then he united both these flowers. So now we have the red rose and white rose combined together, and that is the symbol of House of Tudor. So when they joined together, they became the House of Tudor, not the House of York or House of Lancaster. Okay, so in this way the war finished, and Henry VII became the king. Now, from our next lesson, we will read about the House of Tudor, okay? And obviously, it is a very, very interesting topic. So make sure that you understand this paragraph very well. You have so many questions from this paragraph. Right, as always, this is your homework. So please stop the video here and try to understand questions. You don't need to write the questions, just write the answers, I would say. Stop the video, look at the questions, write the answers in your notebook, and then go back and check whether you have answered correctly or not. So this is how you mark yourself, and in this way you prepare yourself for the test. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, things are becoming difficult, obviously, and this is a must test. You have to pass it. It might look boring, it might look very difficult, but you don't have any other options, so you have to do that. I mean, when I say you, it means everybody who is applying for indefinite leave and British passport. They have to do life in the UK test, and they have to do B1 test. Okay, so I wish you all the best. I will speak to you in the next lesson. Bye. Thank you very much for watching.